Recorders of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Venezuelan politician Henri Falcon has registered his candidacy at the National Electoral Council. He will stand as one of President Nicolás Maduro's opponents in the April 22nd election. Falcon is running for office despite a call from the opposition to boycott the electoral process. He says he will work independently of the opposition coalition, the Democratic Unity, to find a new national unity.
That's the government that we want for Venezuela, a government of national unity that includes and doesn't exclude.
President Nicolás Maduro also presented his candidacy before joining a rally of supporters waiting outside the National Electoral Council. The president said he welcomes the opposition's participation in the election in the hope of a fair and transparent poll.
Opposition candidates that register all of international, national, and electoral guarantees. What more do they want? The only guarantee I can never give you is that they beat us in presidential elections. That I cannot give.
The stage is now set for the Venezuelan election runoff. Freddie Gillingham filed this report just after candidacy registration closed in Caracas.
So Henri Falcon, by far the most well-established presidential candidate to date on the opposition side, has declared that he will be potentially running against President Nicolás Maduro, who's at the CNE today, where he established himself as the one and only candidate on government side. Henri Falcon, just to give you a bit of background information on him, he is the former governor of Lara State. He's also a former military officer, a former ally actually of the late President Hugo Chavez, but he certainly is not anymore. His party, the Progressive Advance Party, is aligned to the MUD coalition, that's the opposition bloc. However, his candidacy today will be moving away from the MUD's decision to boycott the election on April 22nd. We've seen very few opposition candidates coming to the table, but Falcon does break that. Today is of particular significance. The Caracazo, one of the major events in modern Venezuelan history, was marked by a 29th anniversary today. We'll give you just a bit of significance of why it still has so much importance today. Venezuela's capital bears a story that Jose has tried to put behind him. Although hidden from view at first glance, this abandoned stairwell, known as the Stairwell of Death, evokes memories of this day back in 1989 that remains vivid as it was yesterday.
Venezuela was at the beginning of a very difficult economic crisis. They wanted to privatize every service: education, health, water, everything.
Jose was one of the lucky ones. Hundreds were massacred by state security forces throughout the country. So here at one of the most infamous landmarks of the Caracazo, it was on this very stairwell which around 66 people were killed in one day, the biggest amount of casualties from that 1 week of riots in 1989. The social unrest that exploded on this day was sparked by a series of neoliberal economic reforms enforced by Venezuela's former president, Carlos Andrés Pérez. What followed was a revolt mainly seen in the poorer communities of the country. Communities who had felt ignored began to mobilize for the first time. Today, the same social forces that drove the political change which followed the Caracazo came out in force to support their candidate. Nicolás Maduro is seeking another term as president. If he wins, he will run the country until 2025.
Youth must know and recognize the history of Venezuela. That's why we are remembering this today. We are also trying to build and strengthen a social movement, a revolution led by Nicolás Maduro.
Maduro promises to continue the Bolivarian revolution, a revolution which, for those who are old enough to remember, was helped formed and created by them, all those years ago in 1989. Freddie Gillingham, Tesor, Caracas.
President Nicolás Maduro will visit India in March. Maduro will attend the International Solar Alliance Summit. India is one of the largest buyers of Venezuelan oil. Venezuela has been forging deeper ties with countries in Asia, Africa, and Europe to counter the impact of U.S. economic sanctions. Venezuelan Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs Jorge Arreaza is doing that in Russia. He has met his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. Arreaza tweeted that they exchanged views on the global geopolitical situation and agreed to enhance cooperation. The foreign minister says he is confident these alliances will pay off.
But we are sure that we're going to overcome this. President Maduro is going to dedicate his next 6 years of government to stabilize and diversify the economy in Venezuela, and we will achieve alternative routes. The international financial system blocks Venezuela. Then we are working with Russia, China, and Turkey to find new mechanisms.
The governments of Colombia and Peru have called on Venezuela to open a humanitarian corridor to provide aid to the thousands of migrants leaving the country. This was raised during the fourth binational cabinet meeting between Colombia's President Juan Manuel Santos and his Peruvian counterpart, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. They also say they will continue to use diplomatic pressure to address the political and economical crisis in Venezuela.
It is wholly unacceptable to watch the Venezuelan people live through this severe situation, not to allow a humanitarian channel, simply as purely humanitarian measure.
On the home front, Colombia is gearing up for elections on March 11th. Small parties and alternative political movements are asking for fairness for their political participation.
Presidential candidate Gustavo Petro warned about the possible fraud in the election scheduled for the 11th of March. He said that the 103,000 polling stations won't have digital service as outlined in the law.
Nobody knows if the registration officials saved data, add a 0 to the number, deletes one. There is no way to control if they manipulate that. Taking away digital systems removes control and allows frauds to take place in the elections of March the 11th.
The pre-candidate's lack of trust is not unjustified. Power has been in the hands of a few popular parties through all of Colombia's history, and alternative political forces haven't had any guarantees. The best example of this is the number of political leaders who have been murdered.
Whenever we've gotten strong candidates, they were killed. Jorge Eliezer Gaitán was the first of them, in April 9 of 1948. Our own partners in the party killed Carlos Pizarro in a plane, 30 years ago when we made peace and put arms away. Colombia's way is to disappear alternative political forces, or murder them if they get stronger.
Ruling groups say that they have always played a clean game in democracy. Nonetheless, history shows reality. Political power has been in the hands of elites and traditional parties for centuries.
We have very intolerant political history. Governments are always using violence. During the 19th century, we had 26 civil wars, 2 parties and an elite party system. Any alternative political system came under violent attacks.
Muchas de ellas regionales, pero 9 importantes, 2 generalizadas.
Analysts highlight that elites in Colombia have been resistant to progressive left-winged organizations, even though political freedom and opposition rights are outlined in the Constitution. In reality, that doesn't work.
Our history has been written by power groups, state groups, supported by paramilitary groups, when striking alternative forces.
After a long peace process, Colombia will now face new elections. Citizens hope that alternative forces will have some sort of guarantees that will allow them to participate, and say they won't be fooled again by fake democracy.
The two-day Caribbean Community Summit has wrapped up in Haiti. On the final day, delegates focused on two main issues, crime and peace. The Bahamas and Barbados added their names to the CARICOM Arrest Warrant Treaty, which simplifies the process of returning refugees to their home countries. Politics on the agenda, the Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration has been pushing for CARICOM to pledge its support of Venezuela. It also wants the groups to denounce U.S. interventions in member countries' political affairs. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
No pagan nada, nosotros pagamos todo, pagamos lo que tenencia, dirección, revistas, y los taxis piratas no pagan nada.
The United States are forging strong ties politically and economically. They hope to extend trade ties that will be beneficial to both sides and maintain stability at their borders.
Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno welcomed the for U.S. engagement to promote a safe and democratic hemisphere.
The bilateral agreements that we are discussing are the issues of migration, human mobility, education, culture, trade, combating drugs, terrorism, and principally defense of human rights and democracy.
During a press conference, Undersecretary Shannon expressed about the importance of maintaining the security at the border. He reaffirmed their collaboration in areas of mutual interests.
I believe that as soon as we can start the meeting on investment trade again, we are on the way to a commercial agreement.
Undersecretary Shannon also met with other Ecuadorian officials where he discussed international issues. Shannon will continue his tour visiting Colombia and Chile. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
In Honduras, 6 people were wounded in clashes between police and protesters. The demonstration took place next to the United Nations headquarters following the official visit of U.S. envoy Nikki Haley. Honduran leader opposition Salvador Nasrallah and former President Manuel Zelaya supported the rally. They say the police clampdown shows the government is repressing the people.
They repress demonstrators like this here in front of the United Nations that represents the whole world. What can you expect they do somewhere else? I mean, they are showing their real face and saying, we repress the Honduran people when they are just asking for their basic rights.
Mr. Donald Trump needs to know what kind of government he is supporting in Honduras. Here we live under a dictatorship that is repressing the Honduran people, and we're not going to accept it.
Our correspondent Hilda Silvestrucci takes a look at what the protesters are demanding.
The Alliance of Opposition Against the Dictatorship has organized a rally in front of the UN headquarters in Tegucigalpa. The political coalition has complained because the ambassador Nikki Haley is meeting Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez and is ignoring the opposition and the civil society. The Alliance of Opposition Against the Dictatorship wants the international body to address the harsh political repression from the Honduran government and the constant violation of human rights that has occurred since November's general elections.
In Brazil, residents of Rio de Janeiro want answers on why the government felt the need to impose military intervention in the city. For more, we go to Andre Vieira with this report from Rio de Janeiro.
This morning, the colonel of the army, which commands the military intervention here in Rio de Janeiro, held a press conference. But at this press conference, the reporters who attended left with many questions that went unanswered by this team involved in the military intervention. The general dodged and omitted a number of important details and did not confirm the amount of money that would be spent in this military operation. Social movements denounced the military, saying that there is no concrete security plan. They are saying that this is part of a marketing plan which has been rolled out by President Michel Temer in order to rebuild his public image, at a time when only 6% of the population approve of this government. Social movements denounce the violations of human rights in the various cases which have already occurred here in Rio de Janeiro, such as the military collecting photos of residents in poor areas. Social movements have denounced intervention before the UN and the OAS, saying the move to permit the transfer of power from the civil police to the military is unconstitutional.
The Dominican Republic is ramping up efforts to keep Haitian migrants out of the country by increasing military presence along its border with the poorest nation in the hemisphere. President Danilo Medina told the Dominican Congress that an additional 900 soldiers would be sent, at the same time as Haiti expects to see the return of many of those who were granted temporary visas in the United States, with the U.S. planning to end that TPS program for Haitians in 2019.
This national project consists in having proper, secure and stable borders to protect our people, to protect our patrimony, but above all, to protect our territory. We understand that to be a good neighbor, to respect each other, and even to collaborate, it is also necessary to be clear about where one house begins and the other ends.
In El Salvador, the political forces of opposition in the Legislative Assembly have long blocked social programs promoted by the leftist FMLN government.
El Salvador's Legislative Assembly is made up of 84 deputies, of which 31 are from the FMLN. The majority of the parliamentary opposition has often refused to pass laws that benefit marginalized social groups.
In this election, the FMLN intends to increase its number of deputies in order to continue consolidating social programs that we have developed for the benefit of the people, to deepen them and to prevent a regressive movement towards privatization and neoliberal policies.
Many social organizations recognize the efforts of the parliamentarians of the left in the Legislative Assembly, which have passed laws such as the prohibition of mining exploitation. They encourage new candidates to legislate on issues such as what's called the General Water Law and the Law on Food Security and Sovereignty, while recognizing advances in others promoted by the government.
We have health reforms which have reduced maternal death, infant death. We have more boys and girls who go to school, who receive school packages. Agricultural production has been improved. That is, there are a series of advances that have been recognized not only by the government, but internationally.
The parliamentary political opposition has even opposed the approval of donations from friendly countries destined to rebuild the rural road system, and for 2018 blocked the approval of the nation's general budget.
An election like this will also bear on whether or not El Salvador will have new headquarters of Ciudad Mujer. We have seen that this Ciudad Mujer program has been honored by the international community. Honduras took it and did it in Honduras, Dominicana, Mexico, different countries, Paraguay too, because it is a good program for women. In this case, there are 3 new headquarters of Ciudad Mujer that could not be built because Arena blocked that possibility with their votes.
Undoubtedly, the FMLN's efforts aim to increase the number of deputies on March 4th in order to consolidate their projects and social programs promoted by the second leftist government since 2009.
Vintage signs in the Cuban capital Havana are being restored. A local artist is lighting up cinemas, hotels, and cabarets, which have been worn down over time. Kadir Lopez Nieves' project has restored around 50 signs so far, taking dim neighborhoods from forgotten and overlooked to once again an attraction for tourists. The restorations are made using historic photographs for reference.
And this has become, let's say, just another attraction, but an attraction of preservation, from the dynamic of restoration, something that in some way had the tendency to disappear, something that is apparently very fragile, but has a very powerful impact, which is to change the urban space with the most minimal change, by adding light. Tourism, of course, is sensitive to all these changes. Obscure zones would go from being marginal to being photographed. And that, in a way, was the most important thing. How do you establish a cycle of enrichment, not just for the neon, but for the work and social impact that the neon has in different areas?
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Afghanistan's political scenario may change drastically. For more on that and other stories, let's take a look at headlines from around the world.
In a major political shift in Afghanistan, President Ashraf Ghani has offered to recognize the Taliban as a legitimate political group. He also proposed a ceasefire and the release of Taliban prisoners. This will be followed by a constitutional review and a new election where the Taliban will be allowed to participate. If the Taliban accepts the terms and peace talks get underway, we could see an end to more than 16 years of internal war.
I call on Taliban under leadership today. The decision is in your hands. Accept peace, a dignified peace. Come together to safeguard this country, which has been the result of our sacrifices and struggle.
At least 20 people have been killed in Papua New Guinea when a 7.5 magnitude earthquake hit the nation. This is the strongest quake in Papua's history. The tremor, which struck the southern highlands, triggered slides, damaged power and mining infrastructure, and cut power. Authorities are trying to assess the damage, especially in the remote parts of the country. A top German court has ruled that the big cities can ban older diesel cars in their bid to combat the increasing air pollution. Environmental groups praised the ruling. However, there is concern among millions of drivers that they may not be able to use or sell their used cars. The ruling could put pressure on car manufacturers to pay for upgrading exhaust systems of new and used cars. Emissions from diesel engine cars have been in the spotlight since 2015 when Volkswagen admitted to cheating in exhaust tests.
U.S. President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has seen his security clearance downgraded. Kushner will no longer be given access to top-secret government documents. The move was made by Chief of Staff John Kelly, who aims to impose stricter security measures and discipline. Kushner can no longer attend the president's daily briefs, and he will not have access to highly classified intelligence reports. It was found that many senior White House aides, including Kushner, only had a temporary clearance. The legal battle between the technology giant Microsoft and the U.S. could determine how data privacy will be handled in the future. Supreme Court judges have to decide if prosecutors can force technology companies to turn over data stored overseas. The case, which dates back to 2013, involves a U.S. warrant ordering Microsoft to hand over the contents of an email account, which was used by a suspected drug trafficker. That data was held in a cloud in Ireland. And we've come to the end of this morning's news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. Media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.